again so much for joining us. You might notice today is a little different from our normal fireside chat. Today we're hosting actually a panel discussion with some of the Purdue system's biggest and brightest stars. It's always an honor for me and our team.
That's really nice.
Hold on one second. I'm just all right. The teacher in me, so I'm going to back up. Sorry. It's always an honor when we're able to actually pour into our own and highlight some of the good things and some of the good people who are behind the scenes of the Purdue University system overall. And so obviously today we are honoring Black History Month, and we want to intentionally highlight the progress and inroads that African Americans are making right here in Northwest Indiana. It's so important that we recognize our strides and improvements and achievements as a measure of how far we've come, right? But also as a measure of how much we have left to do. There's lots of work left to do. And so we brought in 3 heavy hitters to help us talk about where we've come and what they're doing and how we're going to forge ahead. And there's no better way to determine that, again, than looking at your past, looking back at your past and seeing what can we take from the past to not dwell on it, but to help us to form a better way into the future, right? That's actually a term that we didn't make up. It's called Sankofa. So today we're going to do a Sankofa circle. And everybody can just mute, please. Thank you. Today we're going to do a Sankofa circle. And Sankofa is actually an old African adage. And what it means is to always remember the past, therein lies the future. If forgotten, we are destined to repeat it, right? The name Sankofa is a combination of 2 words, san and kofa. San means to go back, and kofa means to get it. So you put it together, it means to go back and get it, right? The symbol of Sankofa is a Ghanaian expression of a bird whose head is looking back, and she's holding an egg in her beak. Her feet are facing forward, and that symbolizes moving into the future. The Sankofa bird teaches us that it's helpful to dig deeper into our history as we seek to move forward, right? So today, we're going to ask our guests to reflect on their personal past and describe how they use it as fuel to forge ahead into the future. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guests to you, our esteemed guests. We have Maceo Rainey, who works for PNW in the TRIO department. We have Shanita Starks, who works for Big Purdue. And then we also have Shontrai Irving, who is also here with us at PNW. So I'm going to let Maceo start off. Maceo, if you could just introduce yourself to the people, let them know who you are, what you do, and if you could just take a minute to do that, that would be great.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Northwest Indiana. I want to take a moment of privilege to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. My name is Maceo Rainey, and I serve the higher education community of PNW as the director of the TRIO Educational Talent Search program on the Westfield campus. I also serve as the Indiana TRIO president for the state.
Awesome. And we're going to move over to Shanita.
Hello, I am Shanita Starks. I am a community leader first, and a mother and a daughter, but I also work for Purdue University doing early outreach, where I reach out inside of our community to find talent and bring them forward. So one of the things, I wear a lot of hats, one being the NAACP, the Center for Workforce Innovation. I'm on the board for Purdue Black Alumni. So I'm very active with keeping this family brand together. So that's a little bit about me, but you'll learn some more throughout the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shanita. And last but not least, we have Shontrai Irving, who is joining us from the airport. I feel special because he took time out of his travel schedule to join us. So, Shontrai, if you could please tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shontrai Irving. I'm a clinical associate professor of business law, of course, at Purdue Northwest, and I'm also a practicing lawyer I've been practicing law for the past 19 years. I'm fortunate I work in a juvenile court to help parents who have children that are involved with DCS and child welfare, and then also youth who sometimes get into a little problems and issues, trying to put that behind them. Additionally, I'm actively involved in our foster care system, having served as a foster and adoptive parent for the past 17 years as well. So I definitely believe we have a responsibility to help bring our community back to where it should be and do what we can to help each other.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You know what? I'm going to take this moment to do a shameless plug. And because neither one of them mentioned it, I want to tell you guys that both Maceo and Shontrai are graduates of the Leadership Institute Explorer Academy. Those of you all who are in L&I, Explorer is like baby L&I, but it's for our P&W people, our Purdue system people. So thank you guys so much. It's another reason why we wanted you guys to join us today. I'm going to start off with Shanita with the first question, because just, if you've joined us before, I like to dive right in so that we can, take the bulk of our program, really get into the meat, into the heart of why we're here today. And so in thinking about Sankofa and thinking about looking back and taking things from the past, good things that we can help to forge forward. Shanita, how have you taken some good lessons from your past and use it in your present?
I think everything that I do, I kind of reflect on the past. Even when thinking about when Sankofa met, I went back actually to my memory book from high school, and I graduated as salutatorian. I looked at the graduation speech, and this is no joke. The title of my speech was Looking Back at Yesterday and Seeing Images of Tomorrow. So if you can really kind of play that up, that is something that's very poetic and in nature, that at that time, I was looking back at yesterday to see visions of today. I don't know if I envision myself doing exactly what I'm doing right now, but I think giving, being a giving spirit and contributing to my community has always been a part of who I am. I like to see others rise as I'm rising. And I think that motto of people coming together to kind of create this superpower or this community chain from my supply chain background is really some of the formula that I move for. If anyone knows me, how I move, I try to bring a level of energy into any space that I'm in, and I try to motivate us to see that past beyond our current circumstances. So this is one of the reasons why part of looking back, it lets me know that there was something that was instilled in me as a young child from looking at that speech and then moving forward as to what I have to give to create legacy moving forward and to leave this place better than it is currently now. So that's one of my missions. Yeah,
that should be any good leader's main goal. I think one of them is to leave this place better than it started when you got here, right? And I think that this is a good full circle moment for you too, Shanita. The fact that you can look back and say that in your high school salutatorian speech, was it salutatorian or valedictorian? Salutatorian speech, that you actually incorporated the Sankofa principle. So here you are today actually making that happen. So thank you so much for joining us again. Maceo, to you, I'll ask the same question. How have you taken some good lessons from your past? And maybe kind of focus it on your leadership journey. Like, how have you taken anything from your past and how has that helped you to form your leadership journey?
Oh, excellent question. There's two guiding principles that initially I look at in answering that question. One being, I've had the best teacher of them all: failure, shortcomings, setbacks. Through it all, the failure, the shortcomings and the setbacks, I've always figured out a way how to land on my back. So if I can look up, I can get up and move forward. It's part of the human experience is to fall down and get back up. Secondly, I know who I am when I look in the mirror. I stand on the shoulder of people reaping the seeds planted by somebody else. And some of those seeds include, but not limited to, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, A. Philip Randolph, Frederick Douglass, Jackie Robinson, you name it, and I can run the list. So looking in the mirror and knowing who I am when I look in the mirror gives me a great deal of self-confidence, inner belief, and most importantly, the courage and the aspiration to dream big for others who have come before me. And to me, that's the spirit of looking back.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. You cannot have success without failure. Nothing beats a fail but a try, right? So you have to continue to push, stand back up. You get knocked down, of course, you want to stand back up. You want to dust yourself off, and you want to learn from those things that cause you to fail so that you don't repeat those. Very good, Maceo. And then we're going to ask you the same question, Shontrai. What lessons have you taken from your past to help you in your very busy present?
Thank you for that question. I think part of it is just having and respecting the people who have helped get me where I am today in terms of my family and friend support. I know back when I was a freshman at Indiana University, during my first year, someone or a group of people, they threw trash on me in the shower. And at that time, I wanted to drop out of school and didn't want to be there anymore. But I had people who encouraged me to stay and to make the most out of that situation. And from there, I got involved in doing diversity work. I would serve as a diversity advocate on campus, and then later president of the Black Student Union to try to ensure that other children, not children, but other college students wouldn't have that same experience. You move forward, and then when I'm in law school, I'm a supervisor of my residence hall, and someone says that I'm breaking into cars, which I'm not. I remember being thrown on the ground, handcuffed, and put in a squad car. And I just couldn't believe something like that would actually happen when I'm essentially finishing up law school and soon to take the bar. Having said that, I did not pass the bar the first time. I was so like, a lot of the stuff that we learn is not real. It's not legitimate. Someone can just say something and they can just put you in a situation that you shouldn't be in. Having said that, I remember when I would take the exam the second time, I wanted to quit. I called my mother and my aunt, and I said, if you give me the okay, I will just walk away. But of course, they told me to pray that God would reward me for my hard work that I had done. 75 days later, I recall seeing my name on the list and roll of attorneys who would practice. And so I remember crying and being excited and sharing that moment with my family. More than that, when I first found out that I had passed, I called my mom. And then my mom says to me, Trey, why are you crying? And I said, I'm crying because I passed the bar. And my mom started crying. And for those who know me at that time, she called her mom. And her mom says to her, Renee, why are you crying? She said, I'm crying because Trey passed. Well, at that time, my grandmother thought that I had died and that something negative had happened to me while I was at school. But during that time, they were able to find out that I successfully completed the bar. And so when I had a great celebration, I think it was almost 200 people together in Gary, Indiana, they came together to celebrate me and celebrating ourselves because they saw me as one of theirs who was actually doing something with their life. And having said that, I had a lot of people of different ethnic backgrounds come. And when they came, they said, we see how you see things so collectively as a whole. When one of you succeed, all of you succeed. And I was able to take that support to help try to make an impact for myself and trying to use that to continue to make a difference.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being honest and sharing such a personal part of your journey. But it leads me to another question that's kind of veer off just a little bit, but we can really back in. I, for one, and I can't speak for all three of you, I'm going to ask all three of our guests to respond to this, but I am a first-generation college student. I know that Maceo, a lot of the work that you do is with first-gen students. Shanita and Shontrai, are both of you first-gen as well?
Yes.
Okay, so, and you can tell me whether I'm the only one or did you get this too. I was told by my parents and my village, my aunts, uncles, grandparents, girl, go to school so you can get a good job. And that was it. Go to school so you can get a good job. I didn't learn how to network. I didn't know anything about how I was going to pay for this either. It was just go. You have to go to college, right? And so when I'm listening to Shontrai's examples of how he's taken from his past and how it has helped him mold his future, it's filled with stories and things and instances that typically only African Americans would experience, and then B, most, if not all, first gen students will probably experience things where this is a world outside of anything that I've known, right? So what can we give really quickly? I'm going to ask each one of you to give just a piece of advice for those of us, because unfortunately in 2023, we still have first gen students who are coming along. And if you don't know, then you don't know. And so one of the things that I made it my personal mission. I don't have children of my own, but I have nieces, nephews, godchildren, former students. As Sheila said, I was a teacher for 10 years. Those babies have grown up on me and now they're having babies. And they're going to school, they're going away. And my advice to them is make sure that you intern, make sure that you network, make sure that you find other means of paying for college, whether that be scholarships or you work or you do work study, something to offset the cost so that you're not facing debt when you leave. No one told me that. They just told me go to school, come home, get a good job. I went to school for journalism, came home, and ended up being a temp, and eventually ended up becoming a substitute teacher, which led me to my track that I'm on now. So it was all a blessing and it was all, part of my path. But, what advice really quickly can you give first gen students to kind of overcome some of that? Shanita, I'm going to start with you.
One of the things is just because what I experienced on campus, as I actually went to Purdue West Lafayette, I was recruited by Dr. Bell under the BOT program. But one of the things that I learned, I look back, I was in survival mode. So when we come from a space where no one in your family, my mother was a teenage mother. So part of what I should have been was a statistics, but I wasn't. But in the case of always being resourceful and looking for a community within your schools or within your neighborhoods or community, we really have to realize that the journey is not our own. We have to create community for students that we know we sending off to college. So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the job I'm doing right now. I went full circle again, went back to the university, and I didn't see enough recruiting happening in this community for students to go to Purdue Northwest, to go to Purdue West Lafayette, or college in general. But always looking at the fact of having your family, I call it SCORE, setting goals, communicating often, outreach, being resourceful, and then enjoying the process. That's one thing about college that I think I want kids to understand, that it's a process where you can learn and network and have good friends, and that comes out of it. But we forget to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're surviving it. And so I want us to go into thriving mode, and we're going to help them find some solutions so they can thrive while they're there and not just survive on the campuses. So that's one thing people don't really talk about. But we are in survival mode. I mean, I know that that's what I felt. Even though I was there, it was like a big land and no one knew how to navigate it because no one had gone to college to tell me what to do. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had lots of fun undergrad, but a big fat check mark next to fun. But I say I learned how to become an adult. But I did not learn my craft until I went to graduate school. But Shontrai, what piece of advice can you give to first gen college students?
I would say quite a few things. I think the biggest thing was, I know for me, when I was leaving for college, even though my parents didn't go to college, my great grandfather did. And so I remember my great grandmother calling me before I left to go to IU and telling me that she knew I would do well. When you have people who are constantly encouraging you and telling you that I believe in you, you do take that along with you. Now, when I got to school, what helped me was being around other people who were motivated and wanted to do something with themselves. What we would do primarily my freshman year, we would have competitions. Whoever got the highest grade, the others who didn't, they would take that person out to eat, things like that, things to kind of encourage us to do well. And I couldn't believe once I got to school, everybody's telling you to be ready for college, but my family wasn't prepared to pay for college. And so having said that, I realized that you had to have if you had a certain GPA, you got money to go to school and you could get additional scholarships. And so to me, the cutoff was a 3.6. So as long as I maintained a 3.6, I would get an additional couple $1,000. And back then in the 90s, that was a lot of money. It's a lot of money today. So I just made sure that I kept my grades up. I would have a good time. I would hang out with my friends. And then when they went to bed, then that's when I would study. And so really trying to maintain that balance, but being authentically you. And so for me, I want to stay active. I want to do things, but I got to take care of business. And I think that's the same thing I do now. I do a lot, but I got to still take care of business. I can't go to court and not be prepared. I can't do that because I know the consequences for me are much higher than for other people. So to me, you be your authentic self, be true to yourself, but still enjoy the moment, as well, and stay around those who allow you to be yourselves, or you could be yourself with, and make the most of it, I would say.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And we'll round up with you, Maceo. This is your area, so go ahead and shine.
Well, thank you. I certainly would like to swing at that pitch. I provide, by virtue of my job, a lot of intensive support for first generation college students. And that, by clinical definition, means they're the first in their family to go to college. Neither biological mother or father has a 4-year bachelor's degree from any accredited United States institution of higher education. In addition to that, I also serve as the author of what I call the 10 Commandments of first generation college students. And I'll share a few of them with you, starting with number one. Number one being a definiteness of purpose. This is the achieving starting point of all achievement, is a definiteness of purpose. You may not know right now what you want to be, what you want to become, but one thing you know for certain is that you will be a success in life. You will make something of your life. If you can come to the door with that mindset of confidence and inner ability that I don't know what I'm going to do, but whatever I'm going to do in life, I'm going to be the very best at it. If I sweep floors, I'm going to do it just like Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel. If I'm going to sell cars, I'm going to do it like Rembrandt. That type of excellence. But most importantly, it breeds confidence and a success equation. Without it, there's little I can do for you. I want my young people that I govern and that I supervise to believe in themselves, that they could be, to do, and to have what they want in the American dream. So it begins with a definiteness of purpose. And then secondly, gaining a competitive edge. I don't know what that looks like for young people, but you have to figure out a way how to dig out a competitive edge for yourself. Maybe you do hair, maybe you do nails, maybe you're a great speaker, maybe you can work with your hands, but every young person is blessed with a unique set of talents and abilities. So it's very important that they create a competitive edge. Commandment number 2. Commandment number 3, don't gamble with your life. A lot of our young people are leaving our society and leaving the world way before their time for actions and behaviors that are juvenile or just so, to some degree, immature. So we want young people to practice a mentality of not gambling with their lives. And that looks like a different scenarios on different situations, but we want our young people to be safe and practice safe behaviors. And what the pandemic taught us, that young people were engaged sometimes through mental health scenarios, everything from carjacking to robbery to burglary, you name it. And we want our young people to be safe and make good choices. And then one of the final things that I'll leave you with, because I want to give you all of my 10 commandments for first generation college students, but to dress for success. I really believe that's a critical part of a young person's success equation to attain education and then make themselves competitive in the workforce or in the marketplace, is to dress for success. Dress like a prospect and not a suspect. A lot of what employers can tell about you and your aptitude, they tell the moment you walk in the door. So we want our young people, again, to dress like a prospect and not a suspect. So those are some of the things that I share with first generation students that have helped them increase their confidence, remain in school, develop toward graduation, and be competitive in the marketplace. And those situations have proved to be prove a lot of dividends and results with young people, helping them go from the mailroom to the boardroom.
Awesome, Maceo. Thank you so much for that. Honestly, that we're going to come back to that. We're going to put a pin in it. I like to say that a lot with these, because that one is going to help us to round out the end of the conversation, or that road you were leading down. because we want to talk about, you can't talk about Sankofa and looking back without, looking ahead, right? And so we want to make sure that we are leaving really good seed on fertile ground for those who are coming after us. But I want to take a minute, again, it's Black History Month. And so I will be remiss if I do not mention, unless you've been under a rock, then you know that there's been quite some talk about who gets to teach what and who gets to learn what. It's all over the headlines. You have some people who say that, the past is the past, leave it there. All it does is make people angry. There are some people who would prefer to erase our history, to be honest with you, as if it never happened. To put that in perspective from a personal standpoint, so those of you can get like somewhat of a better understanding. My mother was born in 1949. The Civil Rights Act, which prohibited discrimination on basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin. That didn't get passed until 1965. Again, my mother was born in 1949. And so I was raised by a woman who half of her life, well, not half of her life, but the first almost 20 years of her life, she didn't have basic rights. And so she was raised by sharecroppers, people who were once sharecroppers. And they were raised by people who were enslaved Africans. That's a past that is not easily erased. And it's not a very distant past. And it's not to say that we want to cast a dark cloud. That's not what it's about. It's about knowing that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams right now, sitting here in Westville at Purdue Northwest, leading this discussion amongst my esteemed colleagues. This is something that my great-great-grandmother could have never done. This is something that at 20 years old, my mother couldn't do. Like, just think about that. And so I don't think that it's wise to paint over that, because there's not pain in that. There's actually strength in that, right? It's not a very distant past, and it can't be easily erased. So I want to talk about, without naming names and getting all, to murky, what are your thoughts on the current headlines surrounding the teaching of Black history and how some are really trying to dilute it? By banning books. Like, how do you ban books? And prohibiting certain curricula from classrooms across the country. I want to talk about that. I know this is a heavy topic. We have about 15 minutes, and we still want to get into some questions. So if you guys could take maybe 1 or 2 minutes apiece to answer that. I'm going to start with Shontrai, if you will. What are your thoughts on the current headlines surrounding Black history?
I think it's very unfortunate if people don't get an opportunity to learn U.S. history. I was fortunate because when I left to go to Indiana University, I actually majored in Afro-American studies alongside criminal justice. I couldn't believe that I could study about people who look like me and learning that history, because in school, we learned about other things in U.S. history. We learned about Greek mythology. You learned about the Romans. You learned about everybody else but your own. So for me, it made it something that I was very interested in. And the other thing was, going to law school, we do not hide some of our historical aspects in terms of cases like Brown versus the Board of Education, Daisy Bates and Little Rock 9, the civil rights. We learn those things in school because we know how, upholding the law, how it's been able to make a difference with things with our Constitution. So at least having that aspect and learning things in law school to further how important that is. And I think it's unfortunate when we dilute what our history is, because if you don't know your past, how can you truly know your future? So I was fortunate that I was able to get that education. And then my family actually really encouraged that. When I was in 6th grade, a young lady named Cheyenne Allen, our Black Catholic school had closed. And so we went to a predominantly white school, and it was Dr. King Day before it became a federal and state holiday. And we didn't go to school that day. And everyone was like, the next day, who didn't look like us, why won't you here? And so at that point, we had to educate them about U.S. history and Dr. Martin Luther King. This was just, 1985, 1986, so not so long ago. But the fact that it was something that our parents instilled in us, and the fact that we had to educate others about that, and that is a part of our history.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Shanita, your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think basically a lot of the things that people try to dilute is something based out of fear and discomfort. So one of the things that I feel as a community, we have to make sure that we take focus on our history and make sure that it's prevalent 365 days out the year and not 28 days out the year. So when we as a race understand that our history, when you say looking back to go forward, it is a part of who we are. You can't see a person. So I have this see me, be me. So if you can see part of your history,
Yeah.
and you can feel like a lot of people have taken a lot of strides to sacrifice even their lives. When someone sacrificed their lives for voting rights, for all the things that we have today, to me, that's something that I just do not take lightly. And I think our young people need to understand what sacrifices have been made for us to have the privileges that we have today. Some people couldn't even have the privilege to read. And
Right.
yet our literacy scores are very low right now. So a lot of the work that I'm doing presently is about making sure kids know their legacy, know where they have been bred from, so that they can build on those accomplishments that people took upon themselves to bring forth change. So that's one of the things that I say is based out of fear. And if us as a community can make sure that we promote it 365 days out the year, it's no way you can erase it. You only erase something that you fear. So it's based out of someone else's fear. So we have to do our part. So that's kind of how I feel about that particular subject.
So before I get to Macy, I have to jump in really quickly because both Shanita and Shontrai, you both brought up points that I thought about as well. I went to school, my undergrad, for journalism. I wanted to be the next Oprah. That's a whole other story. But before that, I didn't learn much about African American history. I didn't, Black history. We learned about, of course, Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Jr., and that was pretty much it, and maybe Harriet Tubman. As a high school, what was I? I was a senior. As a high school senior at Lynn Bloom Technical High School in Chicago, South Side, there was a Jewish teacher, a young Jewish teacher. His name was Richard Lafreno, and he introduced our class to a book called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. That was a reading requirement for us. We had to do that, and then we also we learned about there was a war going on in Rwanda between Tutsi and I forget the other ones, and then he had us to read Schindler's List, I want to say. But he is the man who introduced Black history to me. This is the first teacher I've ever had, white Jewish male teacher, that actually introduced culture and true history to me. And so it made me thirsty for more. I went away to SIU Carbondale, and I majored in journalism, but I minored in African American studies. I think that was Shontrai who said that. And that was so important to me. I learned so much about so many different people. I can't even begin to name, and those courses have really stuck with me. And that is, again, as Shanita said, that's kind of like the fuel that keeps me going. I can't not vote. I can't. I'll share with you again personal. We're gonna move to Macy, I promise. This past election cycle, I had COVID. But I made sure to take my meds, do what I had to do. I put a mask on, I put like a double mask, and I went out to go vote because people actually fought for me to be able to do that. It's really, really important that we are a part of the process. And if we are erasing history, we don't know. And so when now I'm in undergrad, and I have the lessons from my grandfather, who again, sharecropper, brought his family to Chicago in the early 50s to make a better life for himself and his children and his wife. And then of course he brought along his parents with him, because that's kind of what we did, right? Those were my ancestors. That was my Black history up until I got to undergrad. So it went from me knowing about these small people who I know and connected to this vast majority of people who, as Maceo said when we started, these are the people I stand on their shoulders. And so it's really, really important. And it's not just for me. It's not just for Blacks. It's for everyone, because it's really American history, like you said, Shanita, and it should be 365. And it's not to shame anyone. There's nothing to fear. Some of the stuff is hurtful, but it is also very powerful. So I'm going to pass to Maceo, and you let us know your thoughts on the current state of where we are with Black history. And
Thank you. And before I offer those comments, I just kind of want to issue out my disclaimer, so to speak. My views, my words, and my expressions does not represent Purdue University Northwest,
okay,
but it's the views of Maceo Rainey, the independent thinker. Again, I want to highlight that and underscore that my views do not represent Purdue University Northwest. All right, jumping into that now to answer that question. There's a reason why Alexander the Great, back in the 300 BC, there's a reason why he burned down libraries and universities and books when he invaded Africa. There cannot be any written trace, no written record of Black achievement anywhere through Europe or Africa. One of the first places that he burned the library down and books was at a place in Africa called Timbuktu. Timbuktu is the site of the first university in human history, located in West Africa. There were empires in Africa called Kush and Nubia that he destroyed to make sure there was no written record of Black achievement. And that was in 350 BC. Okay. Throughout the modern world and throughout history, we've seen the evolution of Black achievement from medicine to science to education, develop and evolve over the years. However, it's so easy to gaslight people. What I mean by gaslight people is to make them question their reality and also enforce the fact that they don't know the particular context that they're actually living in, or so to speak, the fact that they don't know themselves. So it's so easy to gaslight people. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, one of the things that he took note of is that it's a structural problem. AP African American history created by the College Board can only be taught to a certain selected amount of people who qualify for AP. The rest of the students at a high school setting have African American history as an elective, which means they don't have to take it. You could take gym or a less academic, laborious class as opposed to African American history. So it becomes an elective, which doesn't get the attention that it needs. So it's a structural problem. Where's the African American studies at the elementary level, middle school, or mandatory course for high school? There is none. You can only get it when you're in high school and you have to be an AP student. So that's a structural problem that actually exists, and it has to be confronted. But African American history is world history, because Africans rank as the oldest people on the face of the earth. The first bones of the first human being were found in what's known as the area of Kemet and Eastern Africa, and they're routing throughout the entire world. So the history of Africans in America, as Dr. Ivan Van Sertima says, they came before Columbus. When the settlers come from Europe and sailed on those ships, they saw African statues. They saw Black faces, which shows that Black people were here before 1619. Not the history didn't evolve in the cotton fields of Georgia, Alabama, or Kentucky, but way before them, because history shows, as Dr. Van Sertima says, they came before Columbus. All throughout what's known as Canada, the United States, and the Americas, the Caribbean, all the way down to Central America, has African influence.
thank you, Maceo. Thank you so much. That was a lot. It was good, a lot in a good way. A lot to digest. And I'm looking at the time, and I really want to respect everyone's time. And really, that's what I was thinking about. Like, so how can we wrap this up I still have one more question, and I honestly want the audience to be able to get in contact with you guys, and I want them to know what you guys are working on, because again, we were very strategic in selecting this group because we know that the work that you're doing, Macy, the work that you're doing with the first gen, and Shanita, you're doing awesome things. Shontrai, I want you to tell them, Shontrai, about the award you just received, but I'm going to combine that, you telling the audience more about yourselves, what you're doing. And then the last question that I want to ask is, and thinking ahead to future generations, and Maceo, you kind of already answered this one. What lessons are you leaving that will influence others down the road? So in maybe 1 or 2 sentences, Shanita, if you can tell us what lessons you're leaving that will influence others down the road, and then tell us your current projects. Make sense?
Yeah.
You got 1 minute, girl, go.
Well, the lessons that I will leave is still just be true to yourself and to your families and your legacy, that we have to find a way to look inside of ourselves, even when I've heard that it's pain in the process. A lot of times when people give birth, they say the pain was so hard, but they still had more children. So when anything that is worth working for, is going to be a struggle sometimes. But I look at struggles as a highlight to what's to come. If I get into a turbulent space, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm about to have a breakthrough. So that's one of the things that I would encourage people to know, that even in the storms, that you end up having a breakthrough, because that's part of the process. And in what I'm doing in my current space, I'm bringing community together. It's really basically what has been missing. Neighbors do not know neighbors. Community organizations don't know what each other are doing. And even as universities, we still have to work in a collective bridge, because kids, I want them to go anywhere but the prison pipeline. So if we can find a way to connect together and figure out how that is going to be, I'm gonna use this platform right now to say that, from being known as a rising woman for 2023, that I'm gonna rise to the occasion, and I'm going to try to bring everyone on board to this. It's exciting to be in this stage, to come together as a community. And that's one of the things I would want people to encourage them to reach and let me know what you're doing, because we need to have a community Rolodex, and we need to know what each other are doing so we can help these children get a pipeline to these jobs. And good jobs mean jobs that pay more than $10 an hour. We got to define by number what a good job is, because I used to hear them like, what's a good job? What's a good pay? They have to know by numbers. So seeing me do the work, I think I want to be an influence for others, so they can see that I'm trying to put my seeds in the water so they can grow after me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Shontrai, you're next.
How am I supposed to go after that, first of all? I'm going to quote Thurgood Marshall, our first African-American Supreme Court Justice, when he said that none of us got what we are by pulling ourselves up by our own bootstraps. And so for me, we get to where we are because of other people, and it's important to help and support others as much as we can. So in that respect, I know that I was a recent recipient of Purdue's Dreamer Award for those who exemplified Dr. King's emphasis on service. So for me, it's always important. It's important to do well professionally, but if you're not doing something to help others, I really don't see what the point of that is. And so I have my family that supports me with that, and my friends and colleagues. You know, I'm working on trying to help youth in the criminal justice system as well, and then having lawyers as mentors to students and to young people as a whole.
All right, Shontrai, come on with me. I need to have it. So you've been
I see an alliance forming right here. I see it.
You've been recruited. Sorry.
Okay, we're gonna round it out with Maceo. Maceo, you've already shared with us your 10 commandments, or part of your 10 commandments, right? For the college students. What else do you want to leave? What else are you doing that will influence others in the future?
Certainly. One thing is to is to force and push and promote a conversation centered around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Northwest Indiana is not only a beautiful place to live, but it's a more ethnically diverse community, one of the more ethnically diverse communities that you'll find in all of Indiana. And it's important that our institutions have representation, representation that improves the human condition. And then secondly, I want to help young people understand how money works. We live in a capitalistic society based on money. And it's important that young people understand financial literacy, how money works. I'm not saying money is everything, but it's right up there with air and water. Try living without it.
I have one more thing before, because we
Yes,
didn't
go ahead.
mention it's important for students to have representation, even with the Divine Nine. I know a lot of people don't understand what that means as far as being in fraternities and sororities, but it was built on education and service, and not having students access to it, to finding tribes that they can belong to. I think that's one of the things that, this is not a selfish plug because I'm a Delta, but it is for whatever sorority or fraternity that we can expose young people to. That had been one of the things that helped me thrive at Purdue by joining a sorority. So I wanted to close that by understanding that we need to build that back into our communities, into Purdue Northwest, into Purdue West Lafayette, or any university setting, the importance of having a tribe or building on that legacy that someone decided to build, organizations built on service and education.
Thank you so much for that. That was awesome. We are 4 minutes over. And you know me, I like to be prompt. And so I want to make sure that I am respecting you guys' time. Thank you all so much for joining us. Everyone who tuned in, thank you so much to our panel. To the audience, we see your questions. I'm sorry we didn't get an opportunity to get to them. 45 minutes goes by really
You gotta have us back on. You gotta have us
Yeah,
back on.
maybe we have to do another one. But also, this was a part of PNW's larger Black History celebration. So check out the PNW website. There are lots of other things going on this month where you can celebrate. If you guys wanted to, reach out to anyone on the panel, please do. Just to continue the conversation, please feel free. It's Black History Month. Let's talk about it. So you all have a great day. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and that